All right, good evening, everyone. Let me start by paying my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land where we meet today. It's indeed a privilege to be invited to deliver this lecture in honor of Sir Douglas Copland, the first chairman of CEDA. I hear this lecture is usually about economics or CEO's thoughts on leadership. Don't get me wrong, these are all very important topics, but as some of you may know, I don't always follow tradition. Why are you smiling already? So tonight I'm going to touch on something slightly different. Now, let me start by sharing a secret with you. The performance expectations of a CEO are pretty well understood. Not always followed, I must say, but for sure they are very clear. It's about productivity, capital allocation, shareholder returns, ROCE, IR, TSR, and so on and so forth. But more and more, it's also about CSR, corporate social responsibility, or sustainable development. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good spreadsheet, and I like to follow the cash. I also love talking to bookkeepers. Who doesn't? I hope there are no bookkeepers in the room. I'm told otherwise. Sorry, that's not on script. But these days, it's not how I spend most of my time. 3/4 of my life as CEO sees me out with our colleagues, our customers, our government, our partners, our communities, and our shareholders. And I also spend more and more time on things like explaining our commitment to climate change, an extremely important issue and one we, as Rio Tinto, we take very seriously. More on this later. Or answering questions on how much tax we are paying. So let's be clear. We pay our fair share of tax. Scott, if you listen to this message, we pay our fair share of tax. Or which industry association we work with. We work with a few, and I intend to keep doing so. Why should we constrain the debate, if you really want to know? These increasing asks signal a fundamental shift in the expectations placed on institutions. As I see it, we have now entered a new era, the era of what we call B2P, business to people. It is no longer good enough to be an excellent business to consumer, B2C, or business to business, B2B company. These concepts are becoming out of date. Businesses must connect with all kinds of people, community members, government leaders, policymakers, employees, civil society, and so on and so forth. This is absolutely vital that we enter the purposeful age, an era where leadership and robust debate on the range of issues is expected now more than ever. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, the B2B era, business to people, and what it means in a complex world. I've been coming to Australia for more than a decade, and I would say the public mood at the moment is similar to other parts of the world I visit. I hear the same kind of things in Europe, the US, Canada, Africa, and so on. What I hear are the same confidence issues around elites, around businesses, and government. There are concerns about climate change, the distribution of wealth, and the potential impacts of disruptive technology, to name but a few. There is no doubt inequalities exist, and with this, a strong sense of unfairness. This is true at both individual and country level. Take America's Made in America drive as a case in point. And when 50% of young Australians believe that democracy is not the best model for government, it's easy to think we're in trouble. There seems to be a deeper question many people are now asking. what is the purpose and the role of modern business, of modern government, of civil society, and of individuals. Now, I do believe Australia has much to be positive about, with great prosperity, great talent, and fantastic opportunities before it in Asia. So, if this is true, what is driving this public anxiety? I think 2 points are worth mentioning. The first is the pace of change these days. And it touches all walks of life, social, economic, and technology. Let me give you an example. In the US, it took 76 years for the telephone to reach half the population. You remember that thing? You had the receiver and the finger dial and the weird noise. It took the smartphone 10 years to do the same. Social scientists tell us that as change increases, many people feel uneasy. They look to the past and hold on to hope for a better future. The second driver of anxiety is social media. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of social. It connects people like never before, but also creates new challenges for businesses and governments in particular, who are used to establish systems and controls. Business and others need to recognize, as historian Neil Ferguson puts it, that networks are more powerful than hierarchies. And we need to get much better at using these networks. We need to loosen up, talk straight and direct, be less focused on always saying the correct thing, and recognize the world is changing rapidly, which means we need to adapt our style to stay relevant and current. I will now cover 3 key areas of opportunity in the context of business to people. First, technology disruption. Second, social disruption. And third, economic disruption. Let me start with technology. I do not see technology disruption as a negative, although I fully understand the fear. And this anxiety is not just an Australian thing. In the US, 1/3 of Americans are happy about automation. The other 2/3 are worried. Both Ernst & Young and Deloitte released reports recently stating that digital disruption is one of the top 5 risks in the mining industry. But where some see risk, I see also opportunities. Businesses and governments need to pioneer new technologies and innovation. If they don't, they will disappear. Technology and digital pioneering is really about people, and it is up to each of us to manage the change required as sensitively as we can. In my view, this requires a new kind of network partnership, B2P style. Let me give you an example that is close to home. It might not be obvious right away, but the Pilbara in WA, Western Australia, has become the Silicon Valley of mining, powered by Australian know-how and innovation. In our operations in the Pilbara, we run the world's largest robot, our private railway, which will soon operate driverless trains. Giant mining trucks now drive themselves. 20% of our trucks fleet are autonomous. These trucks are monitored and controlled by operators sitting thousands of miles away in our NASA-like operations center in Perth. Mentioning NASA, by the way, we have an ex-NASA data analytics specialist working for us. Her name is Karen Brittman, and she's working on some pretty cool stuff. She made the right choice. I hope so. She has. Yeah. All this technology is pioneering. It is world leading. In actual fact, it's way ahead of mainstream items such as driverless cars and driverless buses. Better still, it's all pioneered in Australia. So over a decade, given our technology leadership, we have been talking to our employees about how technology changes role, creates new opportunities, and also requires a reset. Just because a truck no longer has a driver doesn't mean we don't need engineers and maintenance workers. It is clear that this transition will see new jobs created, and in some cases, it will require a new set of specialized workers from other industries to support it. The vision I see is this. The mining sector in all its forms, which currently employs almost 10% of Australian workers, will become an even more high-wage and tech-savvy modern industry. In becoming so, we also need to recognize we may not have all the capabilities we require for the future here in Australia right now. So new partnerships between business and university will be key, as we're making it easy for talented people to come to Australia. In October last year, Rio Tinto announced a new partnership with the WA government and the local TAF to pioneer a new program for the mining jobs of the future. We are designing this as an open source structure so all companies and partners can join us and participate. So while mining 4.0 may not fit some narrative, I'm here to tell you it is alive and kicking. And of course, we are not the only ones in the industry leading on innovation. Fortescue, South 32, and BHP, among others, are doing their own work. The financial services industry is on their own tech express pathway. 81% of banking CEOs are concerned about the speed of technological change, more than any other industry sector. Fintech disruptors have been finding a way into profitable elements of the value chain, such as insurance and mobile banking, and will drive the new financial services business model. But it is important to note that this will open up new opportunities for the incumbents as well as the disruptors. So the workforce is changing. It always has and always will. And companies, governments, and educational institutions will need to support and drive this change to ensure the workforce of the future is ready. Of course, social media has also dramatically altered the way we connect, share information, and see the world. I see it as a fundamental tool of the new B2P leader. Communities through social media now have a voice, Facebook, Twitter, WeChat, to communicate like never before. The reality is that for business and government leaders, fact and fiction can now spread faster than ever, and we need to be prepared to respond fast. The person on the street can now reach the board table direct or even the office of the Prime Minister. As Chief Executive of Rio, my goal is to connect to all our employees, to break through the hierarchy, encourage collaboration, and empower decision-making across the business. Social media is key to this plan. Today, we have over 50% of our permanent employees around the globe on our internal social media platform called Yammer. It has doubled in terms of the numbers of users and engagement over the last year. It is a great way to share ideas and data, but the organization has to have an open culture for it to work. We are working on that. As a business leader, it is important to know that some of what we see and hear on social channels we may not like. Having people that can interpret, filter, and respond to multiple competing perspectives and insights is more important than ever before. In Rio, we call those people our decoders. EQ, as much as IQ, will rule the B2B world. So, it is clear we need a common way of telling our story, and not just about shareholder value. We must not only talk about what we do, but why we do it. Which brings me to purpose, the core theme of the next topic, social disruption or social pioneering. A decade ago, a company would talk of its vision and mission. Now it talks of its purpose. Management books, including the Harvard Business Review, are full of discussion of purpose-led companies. And businesses are busy linking their work to symbolic causes That might be planting 1 million trees or saving 1 million lives in Africa, as GSK seeks to do. Now, I know there may be some in this room cynical about big businesses playing this kind of role. No one cheers on multinational companies. What is often overlooked, though, is the word multi. Multi doesn't mean mono or only one culture. We want multicultures, as this brings a diversity of perspectives and a connected workforce. Our success as a company relies on a network of people using their talents, problem solving, sharing different approaches. This is why social media is so important to us. I would argue that our success as a society requires the same. Yes, we want one set of shared values, clear goals, and a way of working, but we also want diversity of views to allow the best talent and ideas to flourish. Let me give you an example. You can hear an Aussie voice in our mine in Mongolia, or a Canadian voice in Africa, and for that matter, a Mongolian voice on our executive committee. In Australia, 24% of our managerial workforce are women. Clearly, this doesn't work, and we need to do better. Our aim is to have 30% of women in senior management by 2022. My view is that while targets and symbols are absolutely vital, they need to be backed by performance and delivery. I would like our action to speak louder than our words. A multinational can tackle global issues, but also needs to address local issues. The good news is that most multinationals are well placed to do both. Sharing global learnings nationally is vital. Businesses is now expected to have clear position on climate change, transparency, and reconciliation, to name but a few. So I see the renewed interest in purpose as key to addressing the social changes around us. It's an opportunity for all of us to turn our social license into a stronger social bond or contract. I believe this is a make or break for companies. And especially important for those of us in the extractive sectors. Indeed, I would like to suggest we ban the term extractive industry, as it implies we take things out and do not give anything back. This is simply not true. If I said Australia's resource sector was a primary industry or a manufacturer, that might bring about warmer feelings. At Rio, we see ourselves as a materials company, pioneering progress. This is the essence of the purpose we shared within the company early in 2017. And this year, like many other companies, Rio will communicate more, not through big TV adverts and billboards, but an approach using the technology of our time, the social network. We hope more Australians may see our purpose in action, make up their own minds, and see that we really do give back as much to Australia and our regions as we extract. But fundamentally, as I said, we know we will be judged by our ability to live up to our commitments every day. Beyond core purpose, business is being asked to lend its social and reputational capital in areas it has not done so before. Taking firmer views is part of a wider trend. In 2017, in the US, almost half of all shareholders' resolutions put to Fortune 250 companies were about environment and social topics. Topics as diverse as gender pay, alleged fake news by Google and Facebook, and disclosing business memberships. While the CEO cannot and should not speak on behalf of all their employees on all issues, I think it is important that business does take a stand. Let me give you an example. In Australia, we are taking a leadership role on the issue of family and domestic violence through a partnership with Male Champions for Change and our White Ribbon accreditation. This week, Rosie Beatty is in the Pilbara talking with our colleagues and communities on these issues. And we are not just making this effort in Australia. We are looking to export our White Ribbon support to our businesses in Canada and the US, which will see us in the driving seat with partners as advocates for real change in this area. it is a reminder that modern businesses is far more diverse, inclusive, and social than a textbook might suggest. Let me give you another example. We pioneered land use agreements in the Pilbara. We are one of the largest employers of indigenous people. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Should we do more? Yes. And while jobs and economic opportunities are vital, reconciliation is also critical. And we continue to support the national conversation and partnership on the constitutional recognition of indigenous people. The digital age also means that businesses need to be more transparent than ever before. The public appetite for information is high. Stakeholders demand the clear disclosure of information. Transparency is one example. We are a recognized industry leader in tax reporting. And shortly, we will publish our membership principles for industry association. We believe that partnership and engagement are key in tackling the challenge of climate change. And as Rio, we have to play our part to contribute to the environment. There is no doubt that the mining industry is a major emitter, but there is no doubt that we are a major contributor as well to economic and social development in the nations where we operate, including Australia. And we also supply the world with the vital metals and minerals it needs to grow and keep working. For many years, the industry has been reluctant to openly talk about this conundrum. Often, we take an apologetic or defensive stance on matters relating to the environment. But we know it is important now more than ever to a generation of young people, and it is time we join the debate. At Rio, in less than a decade, we have reduced our greenhouse gas intensity by 26% and cut our absolute emissions by 35%. We have pledged our support for the Paris Climate Change Agreement. This is why we support the initial approach set out in the National Energy Guarantee to ensure Australia's energy system achieves its Paris climate change commitments. It will put more rationality into the Australian energy market. Back to Rio. Today, around 68% of the electricity we use is sourced from hydro, solar, or wind. We are keen to explore the green mine of the future, and I'll discuss this specific topic with the head of the World Bank, Dr. Jim King, when I saw him recently in Washington, D.C. We are also thinking more and more about metals recycling and the circular economy. Early days, but our position is clear. We want to be part of the solution and not the problem. My one fear is that in the current climate of increased interrogation of business activities, companies will be forced to focus on the macro rather than issues that may impact the many. It is important that businesses focus on areas where we can have the most impact: the environment, wealth creation, and inclusive growth. Let me close my thoughts by exploring the latter two, wealth and growth, or economic disruption, the last theme of this address. There is no doubt global trade is under threat, and that really concerns me. And as a trading nation, Australia should be concerned by this as well. Decades of research and most of the lessons through history show that the most effective way to create prosperity is through open and fair trade. Signing the TPP-11 is a very important step in the right direction, and it's encouraging to hear that others may join this as well. In the same way, a completed regional comprehensive economic partnership will complement this process. We believe bringing trade initiatives together at the regional global level support both fair trade and domestic policies to drive local reforms and competitiveness. Now, I fully understand and accept that we live in a world where some may question the fair trade model and its ability to make sure that wealth, once created, is fairly distributed. This is where inclusive growth comes into it. It is the role of government, in partnership with society, to ensure that wealth, once generated by business, is fairly distributed. I also fully accept that businesses need to play its part to stimulate economic and social development. I use the word stimulate on purpose, as businesses cannot be the sole agent of economic and social development. Businesses will continue to create wealth, but it needs the right tax and policy settings to do so. Now, I know that big companies asking for corporate tax cut is not really popular. But the reduction in corporate tax rate will stimulate growth, there is no doubt about it, which means more jobs, more support for local businesses, and better livelihood for all. OECD and Treasury research shows company tax cuts benefits all income levels. Here are some of simple facts. Australia has the second highest tax take as share of GDP out of 35 countries in the OECD. And this was even before the US, the UK, and other countries cut their corporate tax rate. So Australia's position is getting worse. And as a nation that imports capital, high company taxes are not good for jobs, investment, or growth. The tax system needs to support the next generation of disruptors, businesses, and exporters to drive prosperity for all. So the company tax cuts needs to happen sooner rather than later. It is clear in the B2B world, partnership must be tripartite: business, government, society, and across national borders. Let me summarize. I mentioned at the beginning the challenge of creating a sense of common purpose at a time of rapid change and community anxiety. I hope you will leave this function convinced that in the new business-to-people era, it is now more important than ever that all institutions, including businesses, connect in radically different ways, speaking directly in the language most people will understand, show leadership, not be afraid to tackle the tough issues and detractors. Choose to do so through new ways of communicating, social media, networks, and people. Critics of businesses are sometimes focused on the notion of what they think business is about. Let's show them that their thinking is outdated by being open about what we do and why we do it. Having a clearly defined purpose, as well as living up to it, will define success now and in the future. Our supporters and the communities we live and work with are focused on our action. It must be about performance, not symbols. We are part of the economic and social fabric of Australia's past, present, and future. We all have a key role in managing the change to ensure disruption is a force for good and progress. And I'm really optimistic it will be. I would argue that it is time to support business to create wealth and for business to step up its game as well. As a 145 years old materials company, one of Rio Tinto's most valuable assets is its pioneering spirit. We intend to keep this spirit, to think like a startup, and continue to make a material difference to our communities and society. Thank you very much.